Hey, Jordan Belfort here, and it is Whiteboard Wednesday. And the topic for today is a really awesome one. It's actually the basis for the entire straight line system. So the title is called the straight line syntax. And just so you know, I never really teach this publicly like this here, but I thought it'd be good to just do an overlay, like just, one big, big picture view of what the syntax of the straight line is. Originally, I was going to do body language today, but I decided to put that off to next week because I just had this sort of, this last second idea that if I could give people a big picture overview of how the straight line works, that it would just give them massive value because, I'm giving so much content right now with my daily motivations and my weekend intensives, right? So I think this would be a good thing for everyone to see, give them a good idea how the straight line works. So here's the deal, ready? There's an overarching concept that really guides the straight line. It also was what really inspired me to create the straight line. And that concept is that every sale is the same. And when you first hear that every sale is the same, it kind of defies logic. It defies sort of, intuition in the sense of why would every sale be the same? Every sale's different. People have different needs, different values, different beliefs, different pain points. They come in with different experiences, right? So how could every sale be the same? And when I first said that, it was about, I think it was 1988. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had my 12 brokers. I said, guys, don't you get it? Every sale's the same. And they're like, what? Every sale's not the same. I'm like, guys, every sale's the same. Watch. It's a straight line, and I drew the straight line on the board, and that was how I invented this system that became to be so well known and revered around the world. It's made so many people into millionaires, right? And let me explain this. Listen, there's so many reasons why every sale is the same, and it's why I'm able to always close at the highest level, and it's why I've been able to take people who really don't have any natural sales ability and turn them into world-class closers. It's because I show them this sort of shift in perspective for all communication, whether it's selling, negotiating, just interpersonal communications between, people of the opposite sex or same sex, whether, in any situation of influence. And I call that goal-oriented communication. So in those cases versus random conversation, every sale is the same to someone like me, who's a natural-born closer, and every other natural-born closer. We have this, it's a God-given gift on nature, whichever you believe, right? But what happens is my brain is ordered in such a way where it all makes sense to me, and from literally the moment I step into any situation of influence, it's like, it's almost over before it starts because my brain instantly orders it along this line I have in my own mind. So what I was doing, I have to sort of open, a close, and these different steps along the way, and I'm able to make every sale the same. And that's what every great closer does. So whether they know it or not, they're using the straight line system. In other words, what the straight line really is, it's essentially the step-by-step principle that allows people to be world-class closers. Everyone who's a world-class closer, natural-born closer, they're using the straight line whether they know it or not. All the straight line system does is it actually takes what all great salespeople do and turns it into a very simple and easily learned strategy. And that's the key, because when you have a strategy, you can transplant it in someone or transfer it to someone else, right? And bam, they have massive results. So there's many reasons why every sale is the same. I'm going to give you one of them right now, the overarching reasons, which is called your straight line syntax. And syntax is simply a fancy word for order. So syntax is and we learned this back when I was in college, it's a scientific term. I was a biochem major, right? The syntax is the order in which you go about doing something. So when it comes to sales and persuasion, when we talk about the syntax, it's the order in which you go about creating certainty. In other words, what you're doing when you sell, when you persuade, is you're essentially taking someone from a relatively low level of certainty and making them incredibly certain. So you're essentially transferring your certainty to that person. The way we do that with the straight line system is through a series of defined steps. And we execute those steps in the same order or same syntax every time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you the straight line syntax as a big picture overview of how the straight line works. So watch, let me just take this paper off here, start fresh. Here's the way it goes. Step one of the straight line syntax is that you must take immediate control of the sale. In other words, what we do with the straight line, I can't get into the hows yet. I've done that in other lessons and in my other stuff, but I'm just giving you the big picture overview. But you must take immediate control of the conversation, of the encounter. This is true of sales, persuasion, negotiation, and we show you how to do that with the straight line. But the point is once you take control, and just to give you a big picture, it's by being perceived as an expert and sharp and on the ball. And in those situations, people will essentially hand you control. Because you're an expert. In the presence of an expert, we tend to cede control of something, right? We say, okay, they're the expert, let them guide us. That's what we do. We've been conditioned since we're able to do that, right? So that's step one. You must take immediate control in the first few seconds of the encounter. And the reason that's so important is because that allows you then to execute step two in the syntax, is to gather massive intelligence. You gather intelligence, and the way you do that is by asking smart questions. In other words, if you were not in control, you would be unable to ask questions. You get it? You'd be interrupted. They'd be asking you questions in a different order. In other words, there are certain things you need to know when you're trying to close. You know what their pain points are, their needs, their values. Are they financially qualified? Unless you can ask them questions, you're screwed. You can't close anybody. And this is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they use the straight line, is when I say take immediate control, it's not so you can talk. It's so you can start asking questions in a certain order, in a specific way, and you can find out everything you need to know to see whether or not A, the person is qualified, and B, give you the tools you need to close the sale. Now, when you ask those questions, however, you must ask them in a very certain way, using certain tonalities and body language, so that when they respond to you, both while you ask them and when they respond to you, you end up simultaneously building massive rapport. The secret to rapport building with the straight line is it happens simultaneously with gathering intelligence. In other words, you ask questions in one way, and they're like, this guy's like the Grand Inquisitor, only so many nosy questions. Or you can ask them in another way, where you come off as the family friend, the trusted advisor, the physician who's trying to cure them. That's what an expert does. He asks smart questions because he needs to have certain information to see whether or not he can help you. And if so, which essentially solution applies to you. You have to ask questions, right? So with a straight line, these first three steps, they always happen in this order. If you don't do this first, you can't do these two. And if you don't execute this in the right way, using the right tonalities and body language, then you will be out of rapport and viewed as the Grand Inquisitor, and you have no shot of closing. So that's your first three steps. Your fourth step of the straight line is you need to have a transition. In other words, when you are done asking all the questions you want to ask, the ones you have to ask, and you know everything you need to know, you're now in ultra-tight rapport because you've asked your questions using the right tonalities, the right body language, and you've listened intently, so they're like, wow, this person really cares about me. They're listening to me, they understand me, they get me, which is the basis of all rapport. You've now put yourself in perfect pole position to now close the sale. So you have this transition, which is as simple as, Jill, Jim, John, Joe, based on what you said to me, this is a perfect fit for you. Let me tell you why. Based on, I asked you questions, and based on how you responded, here's the solution. And your solution is represented in step 5, which is you make your straight line presentation. You make your presentation. And your presentation consists of essentially why, all the features and benefits, most importantly, of your product or service, and why it's going to solve the problems you've uncovered during your intelligence gathering phase. And there are certain rules that we use for the straight line to make our presentation to make sure we do it in a certain way, in a certain format. We focus on certain first things first, right? Can't get into it right now, not enough time. But the point is, notice that we always have executed our steps in the same way. We don't just make a presentation without first taking control, gathering intelligence, you see? So the steps, the order is crucial. It's like when you bake a cake. If I was to give you sugar, flour, water, vanilla extract, 2 eggs, butter, flour, right? And said, go ahead, cake. You need 1 cup of this? You'd say, bake a cake. What do I do first? What comes second? Well, if you put the butter in before the eggs, same thing with the straight line in any strategy. It's not enough to know the steps. You must know the syntax or the order of the steps. That leads me to step 6. At the end, we always ask for the order for the first time. In other words, at the end of the presentation, you ask for the order. And there are certain rules for that as well. But again, notice how it's always going to be the same. You're always going to ask for the order for the first time at the end of your presentation after you've done these things, okay? So let me rip this page down. Everyone take a quick look. Okay, now we go to step number 7, which is where we're going to get hit with our first objection, right? You ask for the order for the first time. What can they say? They can say, yeah, let's do it, which is the perfect lay down sale, no objections. Doesn't happen that often. They say, nah, I don't want it. That's very rare too, because remember, you've already been through your intelligence gathering, so you've probably weeded those no's out already, or you certainly should have. Different training, right, that I do. And then most of the times, though, you'll get the maybes. And maybe is all the common objections. Let me think about it. Let me call you back. Bad time of year, right? And for those, we engage in a process called deflection. In other words, the first objection, we never deal with it head on, because all objections are smoke screens for uncertainty, meaning someone is not certain about something. So rather than saying, I don't like your product, I'm not sure about you, they'll say, oh, it sounds good. Let me think about it. So rather than doing that, we engage in a process called deflection, where we say, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question. Does the idea make sense to you? Do you like the idea? In other words, we took an objection and we said, wait, I hear what you're saying. We're in rapport, but let me just ask you this. Do you like the product? Do you like the idea? Does it make sense? Do you see what I see? That's the first step. Then from there, we run our first looping pattern, as it's called. And the reason we call it a loop is because, remember, we're working with a straight line, right? So if this is your open, this is your close, right? You ask for the, these are your first 4 seconds right here. You ask for the order here. You made your presentation here. So when you ask for the order and they say, let me think about it, you're here, you now actually have to loop backwards into the sale and re-present. In other words, when you gave your initial presentation here, they're still not certain enough. We have to raise their level of certainty. The way we do that is through these looping patterns. So that's step 8. And at the end of our looping pattern, okay, we're going to ask for the order for the second time. So a loop always ends with you asking for the order, right? Then we want to step number 9, which is going to be where we lower their action threshold. In other words, for the people, remember when you ask for the order, let me write this better. I have terrible handwriting. Threshold, okay? So remember, when you ask for the order the second time, they could say, yeah, let's do it. They could say, no, I want to get off the call, or I'm leaving your office, right? Or they could just give you another objection. They'll hop to a new objection, which is very common. In that case, we're going to run another looping pattern here. Again, I can't get into that right now. But before we ask for the order again, we are now going to engage in a process called lowering their action threshold. And what that means is that every human being, there's a fly, okay, every human being has a certain preset level of certainty that they need to be at in order to be comfortable enough to say yes. In other words, me, I'm an easy buyer. I love to buy, right? You don't have to get me so absolutely certain to get me to buy. If I'm pretty certain, I'll buy. So that's called having a low action threshold. Then you have people like my father, who's so hard to sell to, toughest nut to crack for a salesman. Before my father buys, he has to be absolutely certain of it, right? He has a high action threshold. Well, what happens as you move someone down the straight line, you'll notice sometimes that you have someone that is very, very certain, and you can tell because they sound certain, they're acting certain, they're like saying, oh yeah, I love your product, oh, you're a great person. They give you all the signals, but they still won't buy, right? The reason is because they have a very high action threshold. The beauty, and by the way, the secret sauce to the straight line, the back half, this back half when you're overcoming objections and closing, right? The secret sauce is learning how to lower the action threshold. And with the straight line system, we have a very powerful, one of the probably most powerful inventions I made with the straight line is learning how to lower someone's action threshold using a very simple 7-word language pattern that starts the pattern, okay? Once we lower the action threshold, we ask for the order again. Then comes step number 10, which is if they still haven't bought, we're gonna now lower their pain threshold. Pain threshold means that when we, remember our earlier steps, they're right here, right? Number 2, we gathered intelligence, right? Well, guess what? One of those things that we gathered was where does their pain lie? At the end of the day, that's the secret to closing the tougher sales. When you know what someone's pain is, you can then amplify that pain, and what it does is it actually makes them lower their own action threshold. When someone's in pain, they act no matter what. That's the difference. So we wait and we hold that pain in harness. We don't solve it too quickly, but if they still haven't bought, then we actually raise up their pain threshold, and bam, that's when in these early steps, everyone who's gonna buy is pretty much gonna buy. Now, there are additional 2 steps here. You can run more loops. In other words, if they still haven't bought, you can do the product again one more time. I'm falling over, right? Okay, you can do one more time. But the last point I wanna make here is creating customers for life. And what is that? Well, here's the deal. This is very important. A very different set of rules applies once you've closed the deal. That's how do you take a customer that's a one-time, first-time customer and make them into a raving fan who buys from you again and again and again, gives you massive referrals? That's the key. It costs us so much money and takes so much time to get one customer that when you get them, you don't want to lose them. So we have all these different rules and principles and strategies that we teach you with the straight line that essentially maximize your ability to take every person who comes into was in your funnel, now is your client, and turn them into a long-term client who buys again and again and again and refers their friends. So altogether, we have those 12 steps. That's your straight line syntax. And again, now on this weekend, I'm going to have my Saturday morning training. It's going to be an awesome one. I'm going to be talking about body language. And by the way, if you don't know anything about this or you really haven't taught this at the highest level, I'm telling you, body language is literally a game-changing principle. In other words, when you're in front of someone, how close you stand to them, how you sit in your chair, how you make eye contact, how you shake hands, what you wear, how much facial hair you have, how much jewelry, whether you narrow your eyes or open wide, whether you lean forward in your chair with emotion or back with logic. There are so many rules, and these are powerful, and they really cut to the heart of 2 things. Number 1, getting into rapport with someone, and number 2, transferring certainty, which is the secret to closing sales. So again, that training, by the way, and you're going to be getting, guess what? I'm starting this is the first time ever, and I'm done with it after this. I'm giving a free trial. So you can, this is a paid training. I do on Saturday mornings. I don't do webinars where it's like, oh, come attend my webinar and I'll waste your time for 2 hours teaching you nothing and I'll sell you at the end and try to make a lot of, that's not what, this is my best training, 1 hour of corporate style training where you learn a specific skill on a deep dive level. In other words, I go into one skill deep. This weekend, I do it every weekend, it's going to be on body language. And I said I want to do these. I'm going to have millions of people on these things, right? And it's a paid training. I'm charging, you ready for this? $1.99. $1.99. Seriously, I wanted to price these things at a level where I could have millions of people all over the world. So part of it's because I was so incensed with these free webinars, wasting my time. I said, there's got to be a better way. I'm going to do paid trainings. When people want to learn something, they know they have a resource they can go to where it's only about learning. You never get sold to, and you learn the best content out there. So that's Saturday morning. I hope you enjoyed this video. Share it with your friends. This is a really important big picture overview, and it really gives you the context from which you can begin the journey of being able to close anyone who's closable, negotiate like a pro, share your vision for the future with your employees, your staff, your children, your spouse, your significant other. Seriously, the ability to communicate your message is everything in life. This is the beginning of your journey. I love you all, and hopefully I'll see every one of you on Saturday morning. Take care. right, guys, it's Whiteboard Wednesday here. I'm actually in a company. They're letting me do my Whiteboard Wednesday here while I'm training at Salesforce. It's a logistics company, great company, growing like wildfire. And the topic I'm going to cover is obviously, you know, getting paid, right? Is one that actually helps them as well. But seriously, it's a great topic, and what we're going through right now is the opening few seconds of the phone call, like the cold call, to land a new customer. Now, it's interesting here because one of the guys sitting to my left, Rob, great salesperson, a lot of experience, very, you know, always done well as a salesperson. But what you notice that even someone who's a natural salesperson, until they really get to that, like that ultra high level of straight line training, people tend to, it's like human nature to almost want to, like, I wouldn't say dumb down, but sort of ratchet down your communication to a level that you think is socially acceptable. Like, in other words, like, you know, you wouldn't walk around, hey, how you doing, Rob? How you doing? Like, you know, you seem like a moron, right? So it doesn't really work in the real world. But there's something very different happens when you're in a situation of influence, especially if it's over the telephone. Remember, when there is no body language per se, what happens? Well, what happens is that tonality ends up collapsing into body language. Watch. You have three types of communication. You have your tonality, you have your body language, and then you have the words that you say. Now, you've probably seen me do this before, right? With tonality, it's let's say 45% of communication, body language is 45%, and the words are 10%. Now, when I say the words are only 10%, it doesn't mean that the words don't matter. The words do matter. The words matter 100%. They have 1% impact when you actually say words. The point is that as human beings, we do so much communication without actually speaking. We don't always communicate through words, but when we say the words, they matter. So the point is, you can't say stupid. Like I always say, you know, mastering the art of charisma. You know, like, oh, Jordan's got charisma, like he's got charisma. Oh, but he doesn't have it. You know, it's a load of charisma is a learnable skill. It's made up of three things. It's made up of effective tonality, appropriate body language, and not saying stupid, which should be the hardest thing of all for most people, right? So all three things go into communication. When you speak, the words have to be exactly right. When you're using your body language and your tonality together in person, right, you're having full communication, fully integrated, right? And a lot more is being said through here and here than through this, but this still matters. Now, when you're on the telephone, can they see you? So, well, they really can't. Well, they actually can see you. They can't see you, but they make a mental image of what they think you look like based on how you sound. If you sound good, they make a positive image of you. If you sound like boring or negative, you know, most people that go through their day, you know, sort of boring days and neutral, right? They're not really high or low, it's just they're going through the motions. And you don't want to be that guy that, hi, I'm Jim, you're just more of the same. You want to be that light that comes in and just sort of wakes them up and makes them feel good for a second. And that creates a little bit of what's called reciprocity. They almost owe you to listen because you brightened up their otherwise boring day. And it works. It actually works, all right? So let's get specific now. When we're talking about the telephone, right, what happens is your tonality ends up collapsing into body language. So there is no body language, so people will make the mental image based on how you sound and what words you say. I'll give you a perfect example. Many years ago, I was going to Australia for the first time, had to get a visa, right? Now, most normal people can get a visa, just go online and get a visa. I can't, for obvious reasons, right? I got to apply. It's actually an Aussie in the room. It's no easy, for a person that has a criminal conviction, you can't come to Australia. Now, mine is non-violent, and they also are well known, so they let me in, but I had to go through a whole process, right? So I said to my then girlfriend, okay, who's now my wife, basically, right? Or my pseudo wife, we're not married, right? And she tells me what to do, so she's my wife, right? Okay, so anyway, and she has a little money, so whatever, she's really my wife, right? The point is that I said, honey, do me a favor, can you hire one of these visa expediters? Because I don't want to fill out all these forms, just have them do the whole, she goes, yeah, sure. So, you know, whatever, about a week to 10 days goes by. And I'm like, oh, honey, hey, what's up with that visa expediter? She goes, oh, I gotta speak to his name is Boris. I'm like, Boris? And I'm like, all right, I'm concerned. Boris doesn't sound like I want like Chet, you know, from Chet Holmes, who went to Harvard and worked in the White House. That's the guy I want getting my visa, right? He's white. I got where he's from. I'm thinking of Boris and Natasha. Rocky and bowling, all right? So anyway, I said, all right, give me a number, I'll give call Boris, right? So I get the phone, I dial the phone, hello? I hung up the phone, hung up. The second I heard this guy's thick accent, there was a lot of sleepy, I'm like, oh, I imagine this flat top guy right off the boat from Russia. I love Russia, so don't get me wrong, but that's not the guy I wanted getting my visa for me. I want the guy who knows everybody in the State Department, not that he just got the boat himself. He's probably illegal, I'm thinking. From the first word out of his mouth, I formed a mental image. I imagine this guy with like some, short, flat hair, with a cheap rayon shirt and a thin, outdated tie. Like, that's my visa expert? No way, right? And I hung up. But here's the question. This guy, Boris, could he have been the best visa guy in the world? Yes. He could have been the greatest, most proficient visa expediter ever. He never got to show me his stuff because that first word out of his mouth, he was done. I made a mental image of in my mind and based on his tonality, right? And I was that. Now, just so you understand, it's not so much just an accent, because an accent would have been okay. He said, hi, hello, is Boris, can I help you? I'm like, okay, well, I gotta give the guy a shot. He's got some energy. He was like, hello, Boris. Boris never got a chance to even do his job because in those first few seconds, I made that mental image of him based on his tonality, and it was done. Imagine a graph of communication, right? And this represents, this is 100% heightened, perfect straight line communication, right? When you're on every tonality, all 10 tonalities are being used exactly right, the words right. This is your best communication, right? And of course, we want to strive to get to this point, right? We're at the top. But the truth is that normal communication is somewhere around here, 30%, and just move through life. I want you guys to at least get above the 75 to 100% where you sound good, you're sharp, you're on the ball. Remember those things? You're sharp in attack, enthusiastic, expert in your field, right? That comes through in the first 4 seconds of a conversation. And here's what happens. When you speak the right way, with the right tonalities, the words, guys, the words are simple. Because what could you really say? Let's be real. Sharp as attack, I'll write it out for you. Sharp as attack, enthusiastic as that's terrible writing. And enthusiastic and expert in your field, or a force to record. Those 3 things. Let me ask you a question. Is there any words that you could possibly say in 4 seconds to get that point across? No. Hey, Jim, I'm sharp as attack. There's no words. The words don't exist. There's nothing you could say to someone that quickly to get that point across. Now, how could you do it? Well, on the phone, it's going to be through your tonality, by sounding. Hey, Jim, Jordan Belva called from XYZ company. Hey, they'll be like, okay, it doesn't sound like the average bear. Who is this person? They must have something. There's something in there. There's something in that tone of voice that says, maybe I should listen further. Now, when you're in person, then body language, how you dress, how you shake hands, the eye contact you make, your smile. There's a lot you could do in those first few seconds, which is why when you're actually in person, that becomes a quarter of a second. In a quarter of a second, they make a decision about you. Seriously, it's been tested. I'm not making it up. That's how quickly human beings rip you up. They compartmentalize you. They put you back together based on how you're perceived. If you're perceived the right way, that you're sharp, you're on the ball, you're an expert, they will defer to you, so they'll listen and they'll let you control the flow of the conversation. If they perceive you the opposite way, then they'll probably tune out or hang up. But even if they listen, they're going to be kind of cocky to you. They'll try to take control. They won't let you control the flow. They won't let you ask them questions. Even if they let you, they'll give you perfunctory short answers, rushing you off the phone. When you sound exactly right, sharp, on the ball, enthusiastic, an expert, they say, you know what, maybe this person can help me get what I want. Maybe this is the guy that can be my logistics expert, the guy that can help me get the package where I need to get to. So I'll listen. It starts in the first few seconds. And your level of communication, remember, it's not here, it's here and above. Hey Jim, Jordan called from XYZ. Hey, what's your reason for the call? Not Jim, well, the reason for the call. So Rob, great salesman, right? But his natural inclination was, hey, so Jim, the reason for the call. I'm like, no, hey Jim, reason for the, is an extra level of juice, like some juice there. It's just above where you're like, not that. You're not yelling, yo, Jim, it's Jordan. That's stupid, right? There's a sweet spot above even your best normal communication, just above that. And below this insanity, that one, right, is a sweet spot of perfect communication where you're every word, John, reason for the call, something just came out, the best thing I've seen. You have 60 seconds, great, just a couple of, you're like almost an actor on a stage. Now remember, the words matter. This is not about not having the right words to say. The point I'm making here is the words are easy. All right, with these guys, I hand them a perfect script that's, that most ethical, not one exaggeration or lie, right? It's just a perfect script. No, there's not much to say. It's just, hey, I'm calling from this company. Here's what we do. We work for these people. We're the best at what we do. I'd like to say some information. Does that sound good? There's no magic to the words. Now, you can say stupid words, right? You can make up and get yourself in trouble, but you say basic words. It's how you say them that wins the day. Two people sit side by side. One person uses this heightened communication, just the right tonalities, correct words, the right energy force. At the end of the day, I promise you, this is like a stack of leads. This is like a stack of 30 leads. The other person will have like 8 to 10. You'll have 30 plus leads every day. You'll outperform the person who uses normal communication. The magic lies right up here. 80 to 100% of that top tonality. Hey Jim, Jordan Belfort, Uptown from XYZ company in Detroit. How you doing today? Not how you doing today, and what? How you doing today? What does that mean? It means I know that you know that you know that I know. I don't really give a how you doing today. It's a perfunctory question I ask you because it's a societal nicety. So yeah, how you doing today, Jim? You say, okay, yeah, good. We got that in the way, so now try to tell me. That's what you're like. Versus, how you doing today? Like I really give a not like how you doing today. You know what I mean? Right? But how you doing today, Jim? Like, I really want to know. I care. Remember, rapport is based on two things. Number one, that you care. You're not just there to make a sale. And second, I'm just like you. Now, meaning we have things in common. I don't mean if you like fishing, I like fishing. I mean we speak at the same pace. I care. We understand. We process things the same way. So if Jim says to me, I say, Jim, how you doing today? He goes, I'm okay. I don't say, great. He's like, what's that about? Is that what I said to the guy? So again, you always want to make sure that Jim goes, I'm okay. You say, okay, great. Just above you. So, if Jim says, I'm okay, you don't say, great, like Tony the Tiger, right? You're like, he says, I'm okay. You say, okay, great. If he says, oh, I'm good, you say, oh, great. He comes in higher, you come a bit higher. He comes in lower, just come just above him. So you want to match his tone. And then from there, you keep going. But the way you ask that question is, how you doing today? Not, how you doing today? We know what it is. How you doing today? He goes, I'm okay. Say, okay, great. Now, Jim, you might have heard of XYZ company. Now, not Jim. Now, you might have heard of XYZ. He's like, oh, another salesman. So, what you say? Jim, you might have heard. He's like, have I? They can't help them. Human beings, we are programmed. We have patterns we run. They're unconscious patterns. They're based on tonality. When we hear things a certain way, we respond. All right? So that's your Whiteboard Wednesday for today. It's about the use of tonality, especially in the open. You want to be fatigued here and here. You can't. This is normal communication. Every day you walk around. Hey guys, Jordan Belfort here, the Wolf of Wall Street, and it is time for Whiteboard Wednesday. And the topic for today is going to be the power, or should I say the awesome power, of tonality. And I typically refer to tonality as the hidden language of influence. And the reason for that is that tonality has the ability, when used correctly, to essentially fly under the radar of the conscious mind and speak directly to your prospect's subconscious mind or unconscious mind, which is where gut decisions get made, snap decisions are formed, and so forth. So let me just backtrack for 1 second here and give you a principle here about certainty, which is what all sales is based on, the transference of the emotion of certainty, right? You're in an absolutely certain state as a salesperson. Your prospect is less certain. They don't know all the benefits of your product, how awesome it is, how much it'll help them, right? So your job essentially as a salesperson, as an influencer, as a CEO, an entrepreneur, anything that's in goal-oriented communication is you want to essentially transfer that certainty that you have inside yourself to your prospect so it raises up their level of certainty, and when they get to a high enough level on that certainty scale, they buy, right? Now, watch. Here's the issue. There are actually two types of certainty, as you probably know by now because you're studying the straight line. We have the basic logical certainty, which represents the sort of, why it makes sense on a logical, empirical level, that the profit, the P&L makes sense, that the cost-benefit ratio adds up, that it's better than the competition, and so it's just logically they think it through. They say, "Yup, it makes sense on a very basic empirical level." That's logical certainty. On the other hand, you then have what's called emotional certainty, and emotional certainty is very different. Emotional certainty is a gut feeling that someone has that they must have something. Like I just want it, and typically it's achieved in two ways. Number one, through the use of tonality, which again slides past the logical mind or the conscious mind, which is logical based, and it talks directly to the unconscious mind, which is emotion based, right? So essentially when you're using tonality correctly, your words that the tonality accompanies are creating the airtight logical case to move someone logically to a very high level of certainty. And the tonality that you use is going to move that person emotionally to a very high level of certainty. So the reason tonality is so crucial when it comes to sales and influence is that if you don't use the right tonalities, what ends up happening is your words, they speak directly to the person's logical mind, and check, you create that airtight logical case, and they say, yeah, great, it makes sense to me. But what happens is the logical mind, because it's logical, always wants to think about it. Let me call you back. That's what the objections come from, the logical mind. The logical mind always wants to know more. It always wants to calculate. It's not where decisions get made. People don't buy on logic. They buy on emotion. When they get that gut feeling that, I must have this because they have either imagined themselves in the future using the product and feeling good, getting the benefits and having their pain relieved or so forth, getting the result they wanted, right? And the way that you create that is through something called future pacing, which is certain words, but they must be accompanied by the right tonality. So again, words are used to create the airtight logical case, and your tonality and body language, separate issue, right, are used to create your emotional case, more or less. That's a very, that's a rule that you can go by, okay? Now, there are 10 tonalities in all that make up the core influencing tonalities. And you have to know these. They're crucial. Here's the thing. You're saying, oh, Jordan, I have to learn 10 tonalities? Oh, I'm an old dog. I can't learn new tricks. Stop it. You don't have to learn anything. You already know all 10 of these tonalities. You use them throughout your entire life in various situations. What I show you how to do with the straight line system is how to use them on purpose. That's the difference. To apply them strategically at certain points in your oral presentation, you'll be shocked at how easy influence becomes. So again, we have 10 tonalities in all, and this is the subject that I'm going to go through on our Saturday morning intensive. I think most of you probably have signed up for that by now. If you haven't, sign up for it, okay? You want to be there. Listen, it's a very special situation. You can find out more about it by going to the link below, okay? You definitely want to go. There's 1 hour where I literally go full out with a training. It is not a webinar. There's no sales involved, okay? But sticking with this topic right here, okay, what I'm going to do right now is I want to give you 3 tonalities and show you how you use them to link them together essentially to close a sale. The 3 tonalities that I'm going to talk about very quickly here are absolute certainty, collapsed into utter sincerity, And then lastly, the reasonable man. The reasonable man. Those are the three I want to go through very quickly here. Absolute certainty sounds like this. Jordan, believe me, this is a great thing. It's forget the words. I'm so sure about this. It's great. It can even be a whisper where you say, listen, this particular thing is really awesome. It has this feature in it. It could be a whisper. It could be a louder voice, but it's about an intensity to your words, that you're enunciating them correctly. Staccato like beats. That's what utter sincerity, absolute sincerity sounds like, okay? So don't worry about the words. They can be applied to any words. I could be talking about whale meat. This whale meat is the best whale meat. You get it? It doesn't matter. So don't worry about the words. It's a separate issue. Words create logic. We're talking about tonality here and emotion, okay? So that's your first tonality, absolute certainty. The second one is smooth as silk. It's called utter sincerity. We say, John, and the only problem you'll have is they didn't call you 6 months ago and get you started then. I'm totally sincere. No pressure. You and me, I have your best interest in heart. All the unspoken words are coming through your utter sincerity. That's your second tonality. And the third tonality, again, is called the reasonable man. And the reasonable man says, sound fair enough? Sound good? I'm reasonable. You're reasonable. The unspoken words, right? I'm reasonable. You're reasonable. So you're implying that with your tonality. Essentially, your tonality causes a person to hear additional words. So I say, sound fair enough? What I'm saying that I didn't say is, I'm reasonable, you're reasonable, right? So we're two reasonable people. Sound fair enough? So how you link these together to close is you never want to close in a tone of absolute certainty. So you start by saying, John, and believe me, believe me, the only problem you'll have is that you didn't buy more. Sound fair enough? Three together. Starts off with sincerity, collapses into utter sincerity, and then goes back into the reasonable man. So on a chart here, if you were to look at like a wave chart, right, of intensity, it's like, you're hitting this crescendo where you're creating this total airtight logic, and it's this, and that, and believe me, John, the only problem you'll have is that you didn't buy more. Sound fair enough? Uptone here, that's your reasonable man. If you close like that, you're saying, is it really that powerful? It is. I can't tell you thousands and thousands of sales I've closed simply and coached people through when they had the person very closely. You had to run the rest of the patterns correctly, run the straight line. But at the very end, when they're almost there, and they're just, are they going to say yes or they're just on the fence teetering? You say, John, and believe me, the only problem you'll have is you didn't get started 6 months ago because you're already making money. Does that sound fair enough? And bam, just like that, people start to close like crazy. That's the power of tonality. Now again on Saturday. Hey, Jordan Belfort here, and it's time for Whiteboard Wednesday. It's a great topic today. And before I tell you exactly what it is, I want to start off by going through an acronym which you've probably heard of before, seen this somewhere, right? And it's called ABC. And it applies to selling, but really all aspects of communication. And it was made famous in a movie called Glengarry Glen Ross by Alec Baldwin, who played the star salesman, right? And as you probably know by now, ABC stands for always be closing. And when you think of ABC, always be closing, what comes to mind is that hard-charging, over-the-top salesman who's just, close, pushy, pressure, right? And it's sort of not the sort of thing that you want to emulate in your mind, kind of probably make you feel uncomfortable, right? But here's the deal. And I want to say this, again, in the context of what I'm going to say next. So just hear me out and then listen to the follow-up and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. ABC, always be closing, happens to be 100% true. You need to always be closing. The distinction is it's not in the way that you think. Now, the reason I chose this topic was because last Saturday, I did my weekly intensive online training where I go for 1 hour, I pick a specific topic, and last week, when I was in the Q&A portion of the training, I was asked a certain question. And it was about some guy who says he's the king of high ticket selling. joke, right? But someone says, hey, according to this other guy who's supposedly some new young guru for high ticket selling, joke, right? He said that you should never ask anyone how they are. You should never even do anything but just ask questions. If you want to close rich people and make big sales, just ask people questions. And at first I was trying to be nice and say, well, that's not really the way it is in the real world. And then I started realizing, what? This is ridiculous. This is destructive advice that's being given. And I started to bash the guy. And I said, well, in this guy's defense, okay, I think his name is Dan Locke. Before I bash him, maybe the person who's asking the question is misinterpreting what he's teaching. Okay, and I didn't even bother investigating whether that was true or not. It's irrelevant. But the point is, let me clarify now why the way this guy interpreted what that teaching was so utterly destructive, meaning that all you want to be doing is asking people questions. That's how, and they basically close themselves. It's just an idiotic proposition. Now, let me start by explaining there are two sort of, when people divide selling up, they divide it up into two areas, right? Two types of selling. They have one type of selling, which is sort of called the old model of selling. And then they have what's called the new model of selling, all right? Now, I know my wife's gonna laugh, but I'm gonna go on a limb here. I'm gonna try to make a pie chart. I'm the worst artist in the world, right? But I'm gonna give it a whirl, and I'm gonna make a circle here, not so terrible, and a circle here, okay? Now, this is when it gets complicated here, when I try to actually do something with the circle, okay? Now, according to the old model, which is like the ABC comes to mind, always be closing. Here's what they say. You want to spend, let's say this is the middle right here, you want to spend, let's call it 10% of your time, okay, building rapport. That's it, 10% of your time, building rapport. Then, after that, you want to spend 20% of your time asking questions or qualifying, asking questions or qualifying, as the phrase goes, right? Then you want to spend, I'm doing pretty good actually, 30% of your time, so this is 10%, 20%, 30% of your time, okay, making a presentation, your sales presentation. And then you spend 40% of your time closing the deal and overcoming objections. That's your old model of selling, the sort of ABC model. You spend a little bit of time getting into rapport, then you qualify the 20%, you make your presentation, and most of the time you spend closing the deal. That's the old model. Then you have the new model, which is just like the consultative selling model. And this is what the other guy was referring to when he spoke to this high ticket sales thing, right? And in the new model, they have basically different names for the same processes, but they also divide the time you spend doing each one differently. So rather than building rapport, I'll put my middle here, right? They call rapport building relationships, and they account 40% of the time, 40% of your sale is spent building relationships, which is essentially rapport by another name. Then you spend 30% of your time, okay, identifying needs. 30% of the time, which is the same thing as qualifying, right? But with straight line intelligence gathering, we do a lot more than just identifying needs. But with consultative selling, they call it identifying needs. Then you spend 20% of your time, okay, 20% of your time, again, I told you I'm the worst artist in the world, this will go down in history, 20% of your time, okay, offering solutions, which is the same thing as making a presentation, and then you spend only 10% of your time confirming and closing. That's it. Now, let me just tell you flat out that if I spend only 10% of my time as a salesman closing the deal, I'd be broke, flat out. Let me just tell you bottom line here. I don't care who you are, how great you are at presenting, how thorough you are at asking questions. At the end of the day, when you ask for the order for the first time, and by the way, in the other guy's mouth, you never even asked for the order, which is preposterous, which is why I think the guy misinterpreted it, all right? But the point is that after you ask for the order for the first time, no matter how great your presentation was, no matter how thorough you were, no matter how much rapport you built, there's a 90% chance that the prospect is going to hit you with some sort of objection. Whether it's let me think about it, let me call you back, doesn't matter. You're going to get hit with some objection, at which case you then have to start the process in the straight line system of looping, where you essentially overcome that objection by building massive certainty and the objections melt away. But here's the distinction I want you to really focus in on. Whether you look at the old model or the new model and say, well, I subscribe more to the old model, I think this Guess what? They're both complete. They're both idiotically ridiculous. Let me tell you why. You are always building rapport. It never stops. Remember what I said with the straight line? Rapport is not a constant. You cannot close when you're not in rapport. You can't move someone forward on the straight line when you're not in rapport. And you tend to go in and out of rapport as you're presenting, as you're asking questions, based on the last thing you said to someone and how they interpret it. You have these dips in rapport. And anytime you fall out of rapport or rapport starts to decrease, you're going to stop, back up, and go get back into that ultra tight rapport. You must always be building rapport. In terms of asking questions, 20%, 30%, you're always asking questions. You're always identifying needs. So often the process, the first time you go about this, they don't really give you everything you need to know. So you're constantly on the lookout for asking questions. This makes sense to you. Anything left out, you want to always be asking questions. You never stop gathering intelligence. Presenting a solution from the first word out of my mouth. It's my solution. Presenting, I start presenting from word one, and I don't stop presenting until the last thing I say. The idea that, we can kind of wing this whole thing and then make a full presentation, no, it's ridiculous. You always are on 100% of the time. You're always presenting. Your words are always measured. They have power. They have meaning behind them. And that meaning is to create massive certainty in both the heart and the mind, meaning both logically and emotionally in your prospect. There are no free words. There are no okay, well, let me kind of be nice and casual over here, and then just here I'll present. You're always presenting. And now getting back to that first thing of ABC, I will always be closing. Here's the bottom line. From the first word out of your mouth, you are closing the prospect. Not to buy your product or your service. You're closing him or her on the fact that you're a person worth listening to. Every single word out of your mouth, every sentence you say, every phrase you put together has some intent that's designed to close the prospect on, if nothing else, listening to you for the next phrase, to take the next step in the process. On some level, a broad level, marketing is the process of helping someone take the next step, making them want to take the next step to find out more. When you're selling, when you're presenting, you're always, every second, you're closing the person on something. In the beginning, it's you're closing them that you're simply a person worth listening to. When you're asking questions, which never stops, you're asking your questions using certain tonalities that are meant to close them on the fact that they should answer you honestly and forthrightly. And they should spend their time kind of opening up for you the keys to the kingdom to close them, to answer your questions. You're closing them on that, to answer your questions. When you're presenting formally, you're closing them that they should listen to every word and then stay on the straight line to keep listening and not just tune out. You're always closing. So this notion that there's an old model and a new model, it's nonsense. It's pure nonsense. From the first word out of your mouth, you're doing all four things. And right down to the end, you're doing all four things. Because the bottom line is you can't close when you're out of rapport. You can't do anything when you're not in rapport. So it's not like I'll spend 10% of my time or 40% and then I'll be in. Look how ridiculous that is. I'm not just presenting for some defined period. The whole encounter is a presentation. I never stop building rapport. I never stop presenting. I never stop building relationships, and I never stop closing. Bottom line. Now, on Saturday, okay, we're going to have, hey, Jordan Belfort here, the Wolf of Wall Street, time for Whiteboard Wednesday. Got a great topic, and, they always say, like, this is the most important election of your lifetime. Well, this is the most important training I will ever give you. Actually, it kind of is in some level for some of you. For those of you who got caught up in the idiocy of the book, The Secret. I really think that for those of you who got caught up in this idea of the law of attraction, meaning that you could passively move through life and attract the things that you want into your life through positive thinking and visualization. I want to debunk this idiocy for you, really, because it's been used, misused by so many self-help people to try to get people to pay money for programs that don't work and never will work. And I'm going to tell you exactly why, because here's the bottom line. The law of attraction actually does work. It really, really does. But not in the way that they teach you in The Secret. And by the way, I don't even think it's really The Secret's fault. Like, I think that, it's a long time since I read it, but I think it's more about the way that people, the teaching of the law of attraction and The Secret, that really makes it so toxic to people's success. So let me tell you exactly what the story is here and exactly what the problem is, and show you how you can very quickly fix it, meaning how you can actually use the law of attraction to get exactly what you want in your life in a not an effortless way, by the way, but in an elegant way, in a way that makes you feel good, and a way that just makes sense, so you know that it's working, because it has to work, right? So let's go through it. The Secret, the problem they have with it is that people will say, okay, here's what you got to do. Here's the law of attraction. If you want to attract money into your life, I want you to go home, and this is in the book, by the way, you sit on your couch, close your eyes, right? And I want you to imagine, and make sure it's quiet, the shades are drawn, there's no music playing. You got to sit in a nice comfortable chair and get yourself into a deep meditative state. And then imagine a check for $50,000 showing up in your mailbox. A check for 50 grand or 500 grand. And just attract that check into the mailbox and just, visualize it, see it coming towards you. Put it out into the ether and attract that check, and sit there and attract that check. And if you think about it long enough and hard enough and attract that check, then sure enough, a check for $50,000 and $500,000 will show up in your mailbox due to the law of attraction. What a load of that is. I mean, honestly, if that's your strategy for success, the only thing that will show up in your mailbox is an eviction notice. Seriously, your car is being towed away for lack of payment. Your wife's she ran over because you're freaking broken on the couch all day, right? That's not how it works. So let me explain how it actually does work and how you can use this to really get the things that you want in your life. And it goes back to something that you probably saw your science teacher do for you in grade school when it came to magnetic attraction, because it's very similar. It actually works like that. Remember the experiment? Now, you guys all know by now I'm the world's worst artist, okay? So maybe if I'm lucky, my graphics person will help me out here and put some graphic overlays, but if not, it's going to be ugly, okay? But back when we were in school, there was this experiment that we did in science class, and it had to do with magnetism. And the teacher would take out, like that old horseshoe-shaped magnet like this, right? It was a magnet like that, these little bars here, right? And that was your horseshoe-shaped magnet, right? And then you had on the other side of the equation, you had this pile of all these like iron filings, like little pieces of iron that iron filings go, right? And the teacher would say, watch, this is how magnetism works. And she would show you how the magnet's over here, and she'd kind of flip it around now, so the magnet was facing like this. There's my artistry in full bloom. Okay, so now that's your side view. And she says, watch, nothing happens. And then she moves the magnet closer, maybe to over here, and guess what happens? Nothing. Still too far away. So she moves it closer still. What happens? Nothing. She moves it here, still nothing. But then she gets within a couple of inches of the iron. Whoop, the iron goes flying onto the magnet, and bam, just like that, you watch magnetism work in plain sight. This attraction of the iron filing to the magnet. But here's the thing. It doesn't work over great distances. It's not how it works. It works when you bring the magnet you get in the vicinity of the iron filings, whoop, like opposite poles attract, right? Same thing goes with the law of attraction. Let me explain how it works. What you want to do is visualize exactly what you want in life, the things that you want, your vision for the future, where you want to go, where you want to end up, what's important to you. Family stuff, personal stuff, material stuff, spiritual stuff, everything. How is your life, how do you want it to look in 5 years from now, and why? Meaning your WHY. Why does it matter to you? And that why gives you the power to go overcome the barriers and obstacles that are going to pop up along the way, and also the distractions. Because let me tell you something. You can't sit on your and attract things. Just like the magnet in science class, if you want to then attract that stuff into your life, you have to move towards it. But here's what happens. By focusing on it, by making this clear mental image, focusing on attracting it, what it does, it alerts a certain part of your brain called the reticular activating system. It says, okay, you know what? These are the things that I'm supposed to focus on. See, your conscious mind does not have enough processing power to focus on the whole world. You get like 3% of it. The other 97% goes into your unconscious mind. It gets recorded unconsciously. We form patterns. Very helpful in sales, different story, okay? But what happens is your conscious mind, with this limited processing power and limited speed of processing, right? It can only take in a bit of information compared to what's out there. So your brain decides what's important and what's not. By creating this clear vision for the future, it tells your brain, whoa, this is what's important to me. I want you to go, and then you got to go and move towards the things that you want. So you have to get off your couch, take massive action, and then learn the appropriate skills of entrepreneurship, of sales, of marketing, all the things you need to do, separation, right? But you start moving towards the things that you want. And what happens is, because you have this clear image in your head, this crystal clear, visceral image, where like you feel it, you touch it, you taste it, right? You start recognizing, noticing all the opportunities that come up along the way, and you start taking advantage of them. And then when you get close to them, or close to people that might help you achieve them, guess what? Whoop! Magically, you seem to attract them. You get it? It works when you move towards what you want by taking massive directed action. That's why I always call directed action. You can't take any old action, and you have to know the right strategies. There's hard work involved. There just is. I always say, if you don't work hard, don't look at me as your mentor, because I work all the people I've made rich, and there's millions of them, they all worked really hard. There's no free rides in life. There's so many people out there who want to get rich, who want to be successful, and you know what? They're willing to work really hard. And I bet you are too. The only reason you might not be working hard is because you might feel frustrated or blocked, or it's just not working. Well, guess what? I can show you how to actually reconcile this sort of, what's up here with what you want to get out here. It's hard work, but boy, it works. It works. And it works just like that. It works by knowing where you want to go, creating a crystal clear vision, and then moving towards the things that are important to you because you now are alert to them. You see, I'll give you an example. When I was in jail, I got lucky. Tommy Chong was my roommate. Seriously. Tommy Chong convinced me to start writing the book, The Wolf of Wall Street, and all great things flowed from there, right? Well, guess what? You think I was the only person that Tommy Chong told to write a book? He told 100 people, you should write a book about, he was writing a book, he counseled many people that you should write a book. I was the only one that spent literally 10,000 hours studying Tom Wolfe, studying Hunter S. Thompson, perfecting my skills, because I knew without the requisite skills, it didn't matter how much I wanted to get the vision, I had to move towards that. Part of moving towards that is making yourself a master of the thing that you need to accomplish. There's work to be done. You get it? That's why I mentor people, coach them. I teach them skill. It's not just like rah, 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 go out and be great and achieve. You can't. You know what? You can't achieve anything you want unless you have the skills to do it. Or else you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get negative, you're going to hit a brick wall, you're going to say, and you know what? Yeah, you don't know what to do because you don't know what to do. But there is a solution out there. And just, I'm not the only one with it. There's many great mentors out there. I'm just accessible. I love what I do. I have a great track record of it. But I'm telling you that you need to have someone to show you the way, to keep you directed. I pride myself on being great at that. But whether it's me or someone else, please remember, you're never going to be successful by visualizing what you want and trying to attract it to you. You get towards it, get off your, take massive action, learn the skills you need to learn, identify the groups you need to associate with, people you need to associate with, and also, by the way, what does that mean? Learning how to close, persuade them to persuade them to want to help you achieve your goal. That's why persuasion is so important. Now, for all of you who are watchers, I think this is a pretty profound clip. Honestly, I mean, I was anxious to tell you because it was bothering me the last week. I'm watching all these people like kind of aimlessly trying to like attract success. It doesn't work, but there's a formula for it. So I want you to click on the link below if you like what. Hey everybody, Jordan Belfort here for Whiteboard Wednesday, and the topic for today is negotiation. And the reason I chose this as the first topic for Whiteboard Wednesday is it's one of those things that, while it's not traditional sales, it is such a sales-centric skill set that unless you know how to get your point across and essentially win the argument or the sale or the negotiation, you're not getting anywhere. Now, when I teach negotiating in a formal setting, I have a 7-step process that's killer. I mean, literally, it will allow you to so-called win the negotiation virtually every time. For the purposes of Whiteboard Wednesday, I want to distill that down into 3 simple steps here. Things that you could use straight away with no training, just like you hear them, you keep them in mind, you study a bit before going to the negotiation, and you're golden, okay? So let me tell you what these 3 things are, and these are literally going to change your life in terms of your ability to enter a situation where there is a negotiation and know that you're not going to end up on the end of it. Bottom line, all right? So let me start off with the first tip or the first step of what I like to call straight line negotiation, and here's what it is. You must enter the negotiation knowing the negotiating landscape. Let me tell you what that means. The biggest mistake people make when they negotiate is that before they enter the negotiation, they don't even know what a win looks like. They don't know what it means to them. What would they get if someone like myself, who's like a world-class negotiator, was negotiating on the behalf? What would I end up with? What's the fair deal? In other words, what does a great deal even look like? See, what happens very often, I'll give you an example in car sales, right? Someone walks in to buy a car, and they pride themselves on being a tough negotiator, and they walk into a dealership, and they ask for a price that's irrationally low. Like the dealer could not sell it to them at that price. It's never going to happen. But because this person walks in and not knowing the landscape, what's a great deal? Let's say a great deal for a new car is $51,000, right? That's a great deal, right? If you don't know that beforehand, you might be trying to shoot to get the car at $45,000. And guess what? No matter how hard you negotiate, no matter how many tricks of the trade you apply to it, like, take the winner's side of the table, take control, they teach you in negotiating, it's not real world negotiating. At the end of the day, because unless you know where you're supposed to end up, nothing works. You waste your time, you waste the person's time, you come off like or maybe you think that a winning negotiation is $56,000. But guess what? A great negotiator like me could get 51, and you walk out, I got them for $56,000. And the guy's like, what a moron that is. I just got the guy for. See, you have to know the landscape before you enter the negotiation. Let me give you a great example with a company that you know, and that was in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, Steve Madden's shoes.
Steve Madden. Steve.
Now, I have tremendous respect for Steve. I think he's a great guy, very smart. But back when he was first starting off in his early 30s, he wasn't quite as schooled in the art of negotiation and in business in general. Steve came to me, and he had one shoe, and he had no real revenues, and he wanted to build a shoe company. He said to me, listen, I want you to invest in me, and I want to start this company. And I said to him, I'll tell you what, Steve, how much do you need? He goes, I need $1 million. Just throw out a number. I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'll do, Steve. I'll give you $1 million. Give me 85% of your company. He's like, really? Man, done. Go. God, he's so happy, right? Well, guess what? That decision haunted Steve for the rest of his business life until, I don't even know if he ever made it good, though. But the point is that I ended up owning virtually all of Steve Madden's shoes. Now, here's the irony. The next day, because I got such a great deal, I over-negotiated for myself, right? I turned around the next day and took 85% that I had. I sold off 35%. Guess how much I got for it? $1 million. And I ended up with 50% of Steve Madden's shoes for free. You get it? Steve's two huge errors. Number one, he did not know what a win would look like before he entered. He thought, oh, look, 50%, great, I got 15%. He didn't know that no school negotiator in that situation would ever give away more than 50%. Seriously, they just wouldn't. That's one mistake he made. In addition, this is more of a business tip now, is that he asked for more money than he needed. He asked for $1 million. He didn't really need $1 million. So he was off in that department too. But just in terms of the negotiation, he didn't know. He didn't know the landscape. And because of that, he got, okay? Now, let's move on to step two, which relates directly to step one. In step number two, we have the fact that in a really great negotiation, both sides have to feel like they won. If one side wins big, like I did in Steve Madden's shoes, and the other side gets caught holding the proverbial bag of, well, guess what they do? They'll sue you. They'll figure out a way to break the contract. They'll try to stab you in the back. They'll underperform. There'll be resentment. It doesn't breed a long-term partnership. So here's the deal. When you're negotiating, just because you can rake a weak negotiator over the coals, don't push it to the point where it's so one-sided, the victory, that they'll turn around, because what will happen is they'll eventually run into someone who does know about negotiating in business, and they'll say, what the did you do? How could you give away that much? Are you crazy? And then they'll start resenting you. And you know what? The truth is, a contract is only the basis for what? A lawsuit. Anyone can sue you on a contract and try to get out of it and break it. Now, maybe you'll win, but who wants the legal troubles and the hassles and so forth? So the point is that both sides have to feel like they won. It can't just be where you rake someone over the coals, hit them over the head, use your straight line negotiating tactics, which I teach in the larger course, right? Where you can just bat someone to and, they end up hating your guts for it. It's not a way to build a business, and it's also really not ethical. It's not illegal, but it doesn't set the stage for long-term success, okay? Very important point. And then lastly, number three, I didn't even write it, by the way, so let's call number two is win-win, right? Number two. Number three, the final point of straight line negotiating for Whiteboard Wednesday is understanding the value of what I call intangibles. This is a huge thing. It's probably one of the most things that really allow me to win virtually every negotiation that I enter. What I mean is that before I enter any negotiation, I do my homework. And I find out what are the intangible things that have very little value to me, but have huge value to the other side. In other words, for example, let's say I'm looking to hire somebody. Well, what might I give them that doesn't really cost me anything, but makes them feel great, has value to them, right? What would it be? How about a title? The right title. How about giving someone the key to the executive washroom, as the old phrase goes, right? How about the right parking spot? Let me tell you something. At Stratton, back in the day, where your parking spot was the most coveted thing. So if I wanted to really close a deal and get someone to really come, say, you know what, I'm going to give you a parking spot number 4 right in the executive line. That's worth $500,000 a year. Worth nothing to me, a lot to someone else. Titles are worth a lot to someone else. So always remember, whenever you enter into a negotiation, you want to do a couple things first. Number one, do your research. Speak to someone like myself. Now, if I'm coaching you, I'm mentoring you, right? You can just send me an email or a text, say, hey, I'm entering this negotiation. What should I ask? What would be a win for me? And let me tell you what the landscape is. I know virtually every business out there. If not one call, and I know. So you got to know what your landscape is. And if it's not me who's your coach or your mentor, then go to your mentor or coach or do some research at least. But don't fly in blind and you get Steve mad. And again, no disrespect. I love Steve. He's a brilliant guy. But that was something that happened very young in his career and he learned from it. Okay, we all learn from our mistakes, right? So that's number one. Number two is make sure that you don't over-negotiate so that you clobber someone over the head, because in the end of the day, it doesn't set the stage for long-term success, and you'll have a resentment and angry person on your hand, and that just it doesn't work out well, okay? That's number two. Number three, the intangibles. Make sure that before you enter, do the research, figure out all those intangible items that you can give away, and then what you do is you hold those back, and you negotiate the tangible items first. Someone's salary, a stock bonus, an earn out, with all these different things. There's so many different negotiations, right? I can't list them all here, but the point is, there's always going to be these 4 or 5 intangible items, and at the very end, you throw those in, say, you know what, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you the parking spot, I'll make your title so-and-so, okay, and I'll give you the health club membership here on the executive account here, and believe me, it's going to set the stage for a really long-term relationship, and you'll be glad you did this. Welcome aboard. Just giving you an example. In other words, you wait till the very end, say, sound good? All right, is that fair enough? You're ultra reasonable man tone. So you give them those cards. Is that okay? Deal? That's how you close a negotiation. Remember, there is so much out there about negotiating this course, that course, guerrilla negotiating, lion negotiation, negotiating from outer space, right? The bottom line is, practically speaking, if you just did these 3 things, you protect yourself. To get to the next level, of course, we can dig deeper, but this is a huge asset to you to go out into the world knowing how to essentially get the best end of negotiation every time versus the end. And with that, that concludes our Whiteboard Wednesday, and I will see you again next Wednesday for another lesson. Take care. Good luck. Hey guys, Jordan Belfort, time for Whiteboard Wednesday. Got a great topic today, and this is something that is probably one of the most underused aspects of the straight line. In fact, it's something that I really, back in the day, didn't pay as much attention to as I should have when I was training the guys back in the 80s and 90s, because it wasn't really that much of this type of sale, because we were dealing with very wealthy people, so it was more about a fear of missing out and greed-based. What I'm referring to here is what I like to refer to as the P word, or pain, a pain-based sale. And one thing I can tell you is that over the years, as the system has evolved, one thing that I've really keyed in on and amplified in the system is the use of pain. And I don't like to say that, we want to cause people pain. It's about resolving people's pain. And that's a really integral aspect of selling. And here's the thing, it almost sounds like it's a cliche, seriously. And it could be like, oh, I want to resolve someone's pain. And I really, because it's almost like a bit weird, and people dismiss it. But when I talk about resolving someone's pain with the straight line, I'm talking about ninja style on steroids. Really getting in there, digging out what someone's pain is, amplifying it if necessary, and then resolving it the same way you'd put a balm on a wound to take away the pain. Now, again, I want to slow this down for you and show you here the 2 spots. It's a 2-pronged approach. I call it extraction, and if necessary, amplification if they're in denial. In other words, when you extract, when you try to dig to someone's pain, very often you'll find out that the person's in denial. They've gone into denial. Because what happens is when something's making you feel uncomfortable for a while, your brain has this amazing power of habituating. It's called habituation. We start to become numb to our own pain. And that includes not just a wound pain, means psychological pain. Something's bothering you a lot, really getting under your skin. After all, I accept it. It's my lot in life. And almost our beliefs start to shift to start making us think our pain isn't really pain. That's what happens. That's very dangerous, because what happens is someone ends up living a disempowered life. Rather than pain being the motivator to help them get what they want, they become numb to their pain and accept a life that's far less rich, far less empowered, and that could have easily been the other way. They could have lived that empowered, rich life if someone would have come along and known how to elegantly extract that pain, get them out of denial, meaning amplify it, and then use that pain, again, elegantly, without pissing someone off, because that doesn't work very well, right? Without pissing someone off, to close the deal. So let me very quickly show you the 2 spots here where pain really comes into play, and then show you very quickly how it interplays in the back end of the system with the action threshold. meaning that level of certainty that someone needs to be at before they say yes. Action threshold, meaning at what point am I sure enough that I'll say, yeah, let's do it. Now, again, for me, I'm an easy buy. I have a low action threshold. For a tough buy, they have a high action threshold. They have to be really sure. So watch how it plays out on the straight line. This is your open. This is your close. I draw this thing all the time, right? Your perfect sale is directly on the line. We have our healthy boundaries above and below. And the key to this whole equation is there's a syntax to the straight line, meaning what you're doing is you're laying out what would seem like a very complex, non-controllable situation or uncontrollable situation into a very controllable situation that actually moves along a line. Simplest, shortest distance between 2 points, straight line. Watch. Starts with the first 4 seconds where you take control using certain tonalities, body language, keywords. And by taking control, it allows us now to make every sale the same. And that first step, once you've taken control, is you want to start gathering intelligence. You want to gather intelligence. And as you gather that intelligence, you do it in a way using a straight line technique that we teach called active listening. You do it to simultaneously build rapport. Now, gathering intelligence in most sales systems, less sophisticated ones, they're like identify needs. And with the straight line, that's just barely scratching the surface. Yeah, you give me someone's needs, tell me what they are, that's great, it helps me close the deal, but give me their needs, their values, their beliefs, their pain points, their hierarchy of pain. Then you got something. So with the straight line, we dig much deeper in this intelligence gathering / rapport building session. We go very deep, and in one of those things we talk about, it's pain, meaning what is that one worry that's resting at the base of that person's skull and basically keeping them up at night? What is the worry? What are they missing? What's the lack? What makes them feel out of control? In other words, on many levels, it's really sales is about someone going from a place of pain to pleasure, or being out of control to in control, feeling upset to feeling calm. You get it? Feeling overwhelmed to feeling clear. Every product out there pretty much is designed in some manner to do just that. Take someone from one feeling to another. That's why we always say sales with a straight line at the highest levels, the transference of emotion. The key aspect here of pain is that, as I just said before, is that when we're really feeling pain about something, if we're feeling it for long enough, our brain will start telling us, you know what, it's not really that bad. Don't hurt that much, because you got to go on with your life. And if you just, if you're going to be miserable over your pain, well, then, you're just going to live a life of misery. Maybe you should just accept your lot in life and not be so miserable and live a life of mediocrity. That's the trick of denial. That's denial of pain. So what we want to do in the straight line system is, if you're asking questions to your prospect and you sense they're really in denial, like they're talking about a problem that should be a big deal to them, but they're like, yeah, whatever, it just is what it is. Like they're living in a house, the roof leaking, and you're going to fix their roof, and they're like, you want to sell them a roofing job, right? You're like, no, it's not really, whatever, so we just mop it up. Seriously, that's it. Or life insurance. Someone needs life insurance. They have 3 kids, not enough life insurance, okay? They're 45 years old, they're smoking 3 packs a day, they're 20 pounds overweight, and they're like, no, it's not really, whatever, everyone dies. Well, that's denial. That's being in denial. And we can find that denial so often in people who have been in pain or worrying for a while about something. They go into denial. So what we want to do here with the straight line is we want to ask certain questions that raise them back up out of denial and make them insinuate back into their pain, like starting with what's your greatest headache right now? Really, just tell me more about that. And what do you see happening? Ooh, now watch. A lot of this comes down to nonverbal communication. So the tonality, the I care, the I'm concerned for you tonality, the I feel your pain tonality, the facial expressions, they wake someone else up to their own pain. So don't just ask a question and say, aha, got that one. No, if they're in denial, they're not making it a big deal. Ask deeper questions. Use, let them see your visceral response. That will wake up their visceral response. This is what we talk about with matching and mirroring, pacing and leading. These are other things that we teach with the straight line system. The point is that don't just blow by their pain. If they're not acting in any way upset or distressed of what should be distressing them, slow it down, ask more questions, dig it out, amplify it. And here comes part two. The big mistake salesmen make is they try to resolve it right here. Don't do that. In other words, this is intelligence gathering. This is not closing, right? With a straight line, we have first things first, we have a syntax. We gather intelligence, build rapport, then we transition into the main body, we give our initial presentation, then we ask for the order. When we ask for the order, it's the result. We've earned that right by resolving their pain as we make our presentation. Our presentation is designed to resolve their pain. And remember, we're framing, not front-loading, but we're still hitting on that pain. Now watch what happens. If someone's feeling really, really uncomfortable about something, they're really in pain, what does that do to their action threshold? In other words, watch. High action threshold means someone like my dad, tough buyer. I'm not buying anything until I'm sure it's the best, until I know I can trust you, the salesman, until I know I can trust the company that says I'm no way under the sun. I'm not buying anything. That's a high action threshold buyer. Me, I'm like, I think it's okay, I'll buy it. I buy anything. I like to buy it, right? I have a house I never use. My dad, the opposite. World is made up of both types on varying degrees of the scale. So watch what happens though. And I probably told you this story if you watched my videos, is that, my dad loved all his possessions, very fastidious, but the one thing that mattered most to him was his car. Loved his Dodge Dart, loved the car, right? No one can touch my father's car but one guy. His name was Jimmy at the local Sunoco station. If Mario Andretti's race team wanted to fix the car and Enzo Ferrari himself, no, sorry Enzo, Jimmy's my guy. And that's very typical of a high action threshold person. They have one salesperson or one provider, one service provider for everything. And here's what happens. Because my father went to Jimmy at some point when he probably was in massive pain, had to get something done. Because watch, I'll give you an example. As much as my dad loves his car, when we were 11, 12 years old, we were taking a trip from New York down to Florida. We're about 200 miles from home in Maryland. 5 o'clock at night, sun's starting to get low in the sky, temperature's dropping, steam starts coming out of the engine. Radiator broke, right? What do you think my father did? With the sun setting, strange area, his family in the car, worried, sick, that's ultimate pain, fear of safety of your family. He went to the first gas station he could find and said, fix my car, I don't care what it costs. The guy could have been wearing a hat saying, name of the gas station, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. He could have been wearing like the most offensive t-shirt with a swastika, and my dad probably still would have gotten his car fixed, because pain is the ultimate motivator. What happens when someone's in pain, it lowers the person's action threshold. Which is why when we dig out the pain, we don't want to resolve it yet. We keep the pain there, so when we give our presentation, as we're speaking, the person's listening and valuing our proposition from a perspective of intense pain. That's when they're most receptive. If you were to say, oh, don't worry, I got your result here, no big deal. He's like, oh, really? Okay. And he calms down. So when you amplify pain here, you don't resolve pain, you make mental notes. Then you go into your presentation, and now you start resolving his pain. And don't directly address it right here. Wait till you ask for the order to get your first objection. Then in your second loop, after you lower action threshold, if he still hasn't bought, then that big gun at the end is you then reintroduce the pain you extracted and start bringing that back in, raising up their pain threshold, and then telling them a story about how you want to prospect. Only say if it's true. But it should be true if you're selling for a while that you had a prospect in a similar situation and they were in that same intense pain and they ended up buying from you. Now they're in this great position, and future pace them on how your prospect is now feeling and how they'll feel the same way. And then lower your voice and calmly ask for the order. Say, believe me, the only problem you'll have is you didn't get you started 6 months ago because you'd already be feeling awesome. Sound good? And shut up. That's how you use pain. Don't forget this fifth element of the straight line. People like discount it. Oh, well, so I'll just use the straight line like a blunt hammer. Don't. Be mellow. This is not pressure. It's not pressure. Extract pain. Be elegant about it. Be sympathetic. Use your body language or tonality, and then hold that harness and use that big gun at the end. And I promise you, when you do that in conjunction with lowering action threshold and with using all the tonality and body language, all the other aspects of the straight long, they all work together. You get to that point where you truly can close anyone who's closable. That's what the system is about. Okay, now below here, you'll see a link here.